Coach Mark, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast and the special Coaching Beyond the Scoreboard series. I've admired your work from afar. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I love being on these and just talking coaching and talking the craft and, sharing ideas. So thank you for having me.
I would love to start with a pretty top point of your career, which was in 2022 when you played in a national championship game, your first ever national championship game as a coach. Talk to me about what happened there. Give me the story. Give us the background of that magical day.
Yeah, so obviously it was my first season as a head coach. I always start with the fact that coaching at a school like UCLA in kind of your first go around, like the novelty of that is not lost on me. Obviously, like a lot of things had to happen for that even to be a possibility. So thank you to everyone who made that happen. But it was kind of a crazy season. Like we knew at the beginning of season that we were a very talented team and we knew we had the makings to be great, but we also knew like it was kind of our first go around and we weren't entirely sure how it was going to turn out. And then just like little by little, the season wore on. We faced some adversities that we came out on top of. We kind of had some trials and tribulations just of figuring out kind of as a staff who we're about, as a team who we're about. And we ended up playing Virginia in the Elite Eight. We won that game in overtime and advanced to the Final Four. And my husband always teases me because he's like, "You guys were having this crazy season. Like, we opened the season, I think, with 13 or 14 wins, which was like a school record. It didn't feel like that, of course. And he's like, why is it like it took you guys to get to the Final Four for me to like really see you smile like this whole time, right? Because it's like the stresses of the season and the expectations, everything. And I was just kind of so like in the zone that, yeah, it didn't really hit me that we were actually doing so well until we advanced to the Final Four. I will always say also, like, it doesn't mean anything until you get to the Final Four. And then it feels like the Final Four is kind of a tournament within the tournament. And it's like, okay, now we just have to be the best out of four teams. Like that feels so much doable, so much more doable than the best out of 64. So once you get there, it's a pretty good feeling. We played Alabama in the semifinal. We had one of our best performances of the year. So we won that game 3-0. Very like commanding, in control win. And then we advanced to the final. The kind of subtext to that is we were playing UNC in the final. We were playing in North Carolina, so very close to their campus. So we knew it was going to be a mostly home crowd for them. Also, we were coaching against like the all-time legend, right? Like Anson Dorrance. He's won more championships than most of us have years in coaching, and so just kind of to go up against that like titan of an opponent in our first go around as a staff was pretty crazy, intimidating in some ways and exciting in others. And so we go into the game. We had played UNC earlier in the year. We played a very different system. We were very conservative. We knew we had changed by then, and so we decided to just kind of play them straight up. And in doing so, we got scored on twice. So we were actually down 2-0 with 10 minutes left in the game. There's a lot going on, obviously. Soccer is such an interesting sport because you can be in an even game and down two goals, right? Like the score line doesn't always reflect kind of the flow of the game. And we felt like it was an even game. They just had capitalized on two chances. We had not. And so we kind of stuck with our game plan. But we knew with 10 minutes left, like we needed to start making changes. That's like in soccer, kind of like, kind of starting to be crunch time. So tactically, we made some changes. Personnel wise, we made some changes. We end up scoring to go 2-1. And that gave us like the oomph and the boost that we needed to feel like, okay, we're still in this game. Because to score one goal feels so much more feasible than to score two with less than 10 minutes left. So we did that. In the last minute of the game, UNC got a free kick, which typically, like, you can waste probably 20 to 30 seconds on a free kick. So sometimes when that happens, it can feel like the game is over prematurely. Amazingly, we won the ball back somehow on that free kick, ended up driving down the field and earning a corner. And so we took the corner with less than 20 seconds on the clock, I think 15 or 16 seconds, and we ended up scoring in order to tie the game. So when that happened, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like I was just overwhelmed with, I mean, I know what I had been thinking. I had been thinking like, I'm sure in like an election, like your concession speech, like I was kind of thinking about how do I communicate, excuse me, to this group, like how proud I am of them. And then also acknowledge that like nothing hurts worse than getting second place, like. And so that's where my mind was. And then we scored, and then all of a sudden we had to think tactically, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to win this game? When it came down to it, we just had players on the field that we really believed in. I think players on the field that believed they could win, the players off the field believed we could win. Even just analyzing and observing like the difference in feeling between what we were feeling compared to what UNC was feeling in that moment, we knew we had all the momentum. And so the speech we gave in between regulation and overtime was just like, it's not a matter of if we're winning the game. It's just how we're going to do it and when we're going to do it. And we had some incredible players step up in big moments, and we ended up scoring with 3 minutes left and won a championship in our first year as a staff here and my first year as a head coach.
Well, tremendous. It gives me goosebumps. And I think I heard you on a podcast say that there was like a minute and a half left and there's an announcement of some sort like, hey, let's not rush the field. And talk to me about that.
Yeah, so that was in regulation. We were still down 2-1. And it was like, if it was with a minute and a half left, I feel like it might have been a little more palatable, but it was with, I think, like 6 or 7 minutes,
Oh,
like not close enough to the end to really feel like it was appropriate. And when they announced that, like all of us just kind of looked at each other down the bench, like, wait, did they really just say that? Like, the game is still going. And I think that also gave us a little extra motivation. The other part to that too is like because you know, the NCAA representatives, they were between our two benches as we were taking the corner kick. And they knew that basically, like, unless it was a goal, the game's pretty much over, right? Like, that's enough time that if it goes for a goal kick, like in college soccer, the clock runs. And so, um, like, there wasn't going to be another play after that. And so the representatives were like opening the boxes next to us that proclaimed UNC as the champion. They were getting the hats out ready to distribute. And we were like, man, that's brutal. But they ended up not using them. So I guess it ended up just fine.
I love this phrase that sports are an emotional game full of random events. It's an emotional game full of random events. And I can't help but think about your story and how emotional it is to go from being in the national championship game and then being down 2-1. Then you hear this announcement, then we get a goal, and it's all these different emotions up and down. But you're able to stay poised and take it into overtime, end up winning your first ever national championship game. What are your thoughts on your ability and your team's ability and to create an environment or a culture, if you will, to stay poised and not get up and down, but stay neutral? How do you do that? What are your overall thoughts on being able to make that a part of your culture?
Yeah, I think emotional regulation or like I actually I find it interesting. Like I don't feel that you can actually control your emotion, your like gut reaction to things, right? Like I imagine myself as a player, you get scored on, like you could tell yourself 100 times not to be upset. Like that doesn't help, right? But I think learning how to manage your emotions in a way where it's like, okay, you feel it for however long, you have a mechanism to move through it, and then you're able to like refocus on the task at hand. And I think that's something that we talk about quite a bit in our program. It's like your ability to refocus because it's like, yeah, you're going to it can go both ways. Like, right, you can get really low after you get scored on. You can also get incredibly high after you score a goal or something. And you have to always like bring yourself to a level, either up or down, where you can now focus on the task at hand and ultimately execute. I think coaching is the same, right? Like we also say to our players quite a bit, like, hey, just remember, like you're not a fan. Like when you're a fan watching, like it's your job to ride the waves of emotion. Like that's the fun part of watching sports, right? Like so when you're a fan, that's what you expect to do. But when you're playing, like that's not your job. And when we're coaching, that's not our job. Like our job is to analyze, observe, and then interject however we can as a staff, I guess. And we feel like if you are just simply riding the waves of the emotion, then it's going to detract you from actually doing your job. And so we try really hard to, like when our team scores, we celebrate for 5, 10 seconds as a staff, and then immediately we refocus. Okay, what do we need to do next? Or if we get scored on, or if there's a chance going one way or another, like we are constantly helping each other as a staff refocus on what needs to get done next.
Through this Coaching Beyond the Scoreboard series, Coach, one thing that's been very consistent through all 13 interviews, in their own words, coaches have said something along the lines of elite coaches model the behavior that they want to see from their team. Elite coaches model the behavior they want to see from their team. How do you think about that? Is that something that is top of mind for you? And how does it translate for you and your coaching?
Oh yeah. in our program, the way we say it is it starts from the top. Like it's exactly the same concept, but we say that all the time. Like it starts at the top, it comes from the top. And so we know as a staff, like whatever we're going to ask of our players, we're always going to ask that of ourselves first. One example we just did. So every season we kind of lay out expectations for our team, what we as a staff expect for them as players, what they as teammates expect of each other, what they can expect of us as a staff. I think as a coach, sometimes, you're at the top of the totem pole, so you often give feedback to your team, and rarely do you receive feedback from your team. But one thing we ask of our players is to be really open to feedback, to have an open mind, like to um, receive whether it's criticism or praise or whatever, and figure out a way how to apply that and change ultimately. We just did an exercise where now every 2 to 3 weeks we kind of do an accountability check with our group. And we just put up the expectations we put at the beginning of the season. And we say, okay, how are we doing at these? Which ones are we satisfying? Which ones are we not? The first time we did it, we kind of asked the team to assess themselves and like what we as a staff can expect of them, those expectations, and then of what they can expect from each other. But this last round that we did, we opened it up too to, okay, this is what we told you guys you could expect of us as a staff. Are we hitting these marks? Are there areas where we need to grow? Are there things that we should know that maybe we're not satisfying? And I could tell the group was a little awkward at first. It kind of took us to say, hey, okay, I'm going to acknowledge that like I haven't been doing this very well and I'm going to work on it, you guys, for them to kind of feel comfortable to then give us that feedback. But I really do think, yeah, whatever we are going to ask of them, like we have to be ready to do it first. Not only does that kind of set the stage for accountability, but it also, like you said, it gives them a model of exactly kind of what we want to see. And when it comes to the emotional, what we were talking about before, that kind of control and reaction to your emotions, that is something that we really try to model. Where it's like, okay, through good, bad, and ugly, like we're gonna be steady.
What a great practice. One of my favorite questions for athletes to ask their coach before the season is, what are your expectations of me this season? I had a friend, Hall of Fame speaker on my podcast 2 weeks ago. He said, no expectations plus no education leads to frustration. When we don't give expectation, then don't educate them on it, it's going to lead to frustration, probably on both sides. And yet, so many coaches are still missing the opportunity to lay out these expectations, these key preseason questions. Where have you seen this play out, either on the field, or maybe it's team chemistry, or maybe it's a sidebar conversation or a story? How have you seen the impact of laying the groundwork with expectations later on in the season?
Yeah, I have a lot of similar beliefs in the sense of like I'm never going to judge a player on their behavior unless a clear expectation has been set. Right? Like I'm not going to get mad at them for not meeting a secret expectation that I have of them. Right? Like I feel it's only fair that I lay it out with a ton of clarity and then they choose whether or not to meet the expectation. But I don't think it's fair to just have these hidden expectations and then, yeah, you're going to pass judgment on someone that may or may not be aware of them. And so that's something we try really hard to do is like we're very clear with our expectations, very clear with what we expect their behaviors to be, what their interactions to be. We kind of set the tone for all of our interactions before they happen. So that then, like I said, now I can make a judgment that they've either chosen to meet the expectation or they've chosen not to is more in their control. Sometimes in our staff, we joke that it's called the balls in your court coaching philosophy. Like, here the expectation, now the ball's in your court. Oftentimes, too, it's like, here's the expectation, here's also the consequence. Now you really get to make a choice as to where you're going to fall. Um, in regard to how it plays out in this season, I think it reduces the amount of it's kind of like if you do a good job managing at the beginning, then you're going to save yourself a lot of time, energy, and conversation managing at the end. And that's one thing I think we've done a decent job with this season is like we've been very, very, very clear with expectations. And anytime someone's not reaching them, we make it very clear to everybody, or like we kind of reset them so that everybody's aware of what it is. A good example just recently with this group is like we have a lot of young players on the team. We have, I think, 11 or 12 new players to the program, which is about a third of our team. And of course, after our first 3 games, we ended up playing 3 top 20 teams in our first 3 games. So a really tough schedule on paper. And so we had some players a little disgruntled with how much they played or didn't play. And you could tell by the third game, like it was really just taking away from what we were trying to do. One of the expectations our team set for each other was to genuinely enjoy others' successes as if they're your own. We had gotten quite pretty far from that because everyone was concerned with how much they were playing, didn't really care. They started not to care as much with how our team was doing. And so we had a team meeting, and that's where it was great because we were able to just pull up the expectations that we've been talking about from the beginning. And that's where that assessment came in, where it's like, okay, are we doing these things? If we're not, then let's reset it. And then we ended up having a team meeting about it. And then we ended up keeping the younger players, like the freshman group, back. And we were just like, hey, in case it wasn't clear, the whole meeting we just had was for you guys. Like, and we kind of just made it an open forum. We're like, okay, this is what it is. Like, and we had a player say, well, as freshmen, we just shouldn't expect to play. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. That is not the case. We had 4 freshmen start last game. Like, let's reset the expectation, right? I was like, you don't get to hide behind your age because if you had done enough in training to show that you were going to help us on the field, then you would be playing. Like, one of the other things we expect of them is accountability. I'm like, so we're going to rewrite this and rephrase this to be more accountable. And it was a really good meeting. And so now I think the team's in a really great place, but it was because we had set expectations from the beginning. We had stayed true to them and then we could revisit them and then we can course correct kind of as necessary throughout the season.
I think what I'm hearing from you most, coach, is that the first step is obviously to set it preseason, but then expect to revisit these things as the season goes on. Because some coaches I could just hear, yeah, we do that in the preseason, like the player parent meeting, we go through some of that stuff. But how often are you revisiting it during the season? I think that's probably the difference between good and great.
Yeah, yes, for sure. What's funny is I don't know if we ever intended to revisit it so formally,
Hmm.
but obviously we kind of needed a little crisis intervention, and so we did that. And then one of our youngest players, and credit to her, I was really proud of her for this. When we did individual meetings as well, and she said, "Hey, like, the accountability check we did yesterday, like, maybe it would be great for this group if we did it every 2 to 3 weeks." And I was like, you know what? That actually is a great idea. And so that's what we do now. So every 2 to 3 weeks, we do kind of a similar accountability check. We do it as a whole group. Um, we've created a culture where players, I think, feel empowered enough to speak up. One of the things we tell them too is like if it's bothering you enough to say it to me in like an individual setting, well then when it's an open forum, like it's your responsibility to say it to everybody. Like it goes both ways, right? Um, and so now it's kind of a practice that we use, and I think it's been really effective. And it's a great just way to do like a little check-in and then correction. Another great exercise that we've used in the past is like start, stop, continue. So, okay, you just like analyze, okay, let's talk about like what behaviors do we want to stop? Which ones do we want to start? Which ones do we want to continue as we correct throughout the season? And so I do think that creating a space for feedback is really helpful as you manage a team.
Yeah, and to me, it speaks directly to psychological safety, which has been a major part of this podcast. We've had Dr. Amy Edmondson, who's kind of pioneered and written a lot of books about it. I'm curious, it sounds like your program has an extremely high level of psychological safety to be able to have these types of conversations. Lonnie Almeida is the legendary coach at Florida State softball, and they do something kind of similar, coach, where they do what's called a Tell the Truth Tuesdays. So every Tuesday and they kind of call it that, they coin it that, they know what they're walking into, so the team's not getting blindsided by, hey, we're gonna spill some truth here. I would love to know what's the unlock to be able to create a room, an environment that is psychologically safe. Where does it start? How can coaches do a better job? I could hear some coaches go, man, I would love to do something like that, but I just think it would get catty or things, it would just get out of hand. What's the key to create a room like that?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. The first, as we said from the beginning here, is like it starts from the top. So one thing our staff really prides ourselves on, and we say this to the group, they know it's an expectation, but they know we say like you could say anything to us, like I said, good, bad, or ugly. You can expect us every single time to respond with composure and reason. And so like our players, even if they broke a rule or if they got caught doing something or whatever, like they know they can come to us and every single time we will be composed and we will be reasonable. I think that's really key. Like we don't want our players to be afraid of us because then they don't come to us, right? Then we miss a lot of things. So we have to be accessible. So that's how I think of it, like from our staff, is like setting an expectation to the players, being very open about that and staying very true to it. And then of course living it. So word gets around, right? Like if you come to me with something and I scream at you, like word gets around, even if it was just me and you. And so like we have to live that every single day. And then one of the things that we've really worked on with our group is creating that within the team and kind of like setting guidelines for the group that allows for those types of conversations to happen. One of the ones we kind of have been living by this season is making sure that everybody knows that every single player in the room has a responsibility to help their teammates not do damage to the team, right? Like if I see you doing something that's going to hurt the team, whether you mean to or not, it is actually my responsibility to you and it is my responsibility to the team to address you, right? And to do it in a way that it doesn't have to be combative, it doesn't have to be berating, it doesn't have to be condescending, whatever. It's just like, hey, I notice you doing that. Like that's not going to help us, right? We talk a lot about how communication, like your tone, your body language, all of those things matter, whether you're on the giving end or receiving end, right? And we kind of help our players see the benefit of if I've done something that's going to hurt the team and somebody addresses me, like I actually don't get to be resentful. I don't get to be upset because we kind of turn it. We're like, what, you're going to be upset that someone's trying to help you? Like that's not how it works, right? Like I should in fact be thankful that you were brave enough to address me. And so and it has taken time, right, to do these things, but now we have created a space where players, I think, feel safe enough to say those things. Um, they are very conscious of how they say it, of when they say it. Like we also talk quite a bit about like just as much as the initial conversation is important, you have to be thoughtful enough to realize that if it has gone wrong, like you have to have an ability to repair too. Like I think this concept of repairing is really huge because that gives you a little safety net, right? Like if you work a lot on repairing, then like the first conversation is not as high stakes all the time. And so we try to do a lot of little things, I think, to create an overall culture. Yeah, that is very psychologically safe. And that is a word that we've used for the last 4 years. Like that is a focus of ours, is to create a space that feels psychologically safe for everybody involved.
Yeah, it doesn't happen by accident. I want to go back to the national championship one last time because I think winning a national championship is something that every coach dreams about. But I would just be curious to know what's the best lesson that you learned from achievement?
Uh, it is fleeting. That's one. But I think like flexibility, that season really taught me the importance of flexibility. Um, and not getting so stuck in your ways. I think humility plays into that too. And achievement has taught me a lot about humility because like soccer is such an interesting sport. Like it could go either way, right? You can prepare so well, you can have better players, you can have a better performance, you could still lose. We've been on both sides of that many times as coaches and as players. So I think like knowing that achievement is fleeting, knowing that achievement takes a lot of intention, knowing that continued achievement takes a lot of flexibility. Like those are the things that I really took from that first year and have been a huge, huge part of kind of my evolving coaching philosophy.
And it'd be so great to step in as your first year and to have this major achievement. I think people would probably think there's a lot of pros that come with that. But I also think there's some cons that come with that too. What are the challenges that come with being ultra successful right away?
Uh, there's a lot, but there's just a lot of challenges being a coach, I think, and being a player. Just sports is challenging. Finding success so quickly, I think now that I have had time to reflect, um, I think because the success came so quickly, it was hard for us to discern like the reason for that success. And to really like boil it down to what made us so successful was hard and so fast. And it wasn't necessarily something that we built over years and years and years and years, and it didn't kind of naturally solidify. It now, 4 years later, 3 years later, feels a lot more concrete and clear than it did the first year. And so now I can look back and say, okay, the reason we were so successful is because of buy-in. The reason we were so successful is because of kind of this presence of mind of like, hey, things could go wrong, but we still got this, like this kind of quiet confidence. I don't know if you had asked me right after if those were the things that I necessarily would have identified. But now looking back and having gone through some other seasons, like now I can really say those are the reasons that we were so successful right away.
Hmm. If a coach wants to be elite, whether it's at the high school level, the college level, or the pro level, if they want to become an elite coach, what's one thing that can't bother them?
Uh, there's a lot. Um, this is where I'm growing too, just learning like where to have the thick skin. I've never been someone where the wins and losses really, honestly, they don't bother me. They also don't give me that, like, they're exciting, but I'm not hanging my hat on like great results. Like, we last week beat the number one team in the country, and like that was great, but we got a lot of season left. So for me, it's never really been the results. For me, it's the relationships, and it's like, I think one of the hardest things for even now for me to wrap my head around is like I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm going to make the best decision I can with all the information I have at that moment. It could still not be the best decision. I think that's the part that's really hard for me to live with. Is like I understand the impact I have on players. I understand the impact I have on families. Like I understand that and I take a lot of responsibility for that. And sometimes I don't make the right decision and I can see it go wrong and like I from a personal level feel so terrible about it that I've had to learn to kind of what I said is what I tell myself, which is like, okay, you made the best decision you could with the information you had. And I have to remind myself of that because sometimes, like, that's what gets me more than any win and loss. It's like when I've made a decision that affects somebody and when I see the repercussions of that and they're negative, like, that's what really it just like gets to me to in the core, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And at your time at UCLA, you haven't had a lot of losses, but I'd be curious on how do you handle losses? What does it look like for you personally? Do you have a process to go through that? Does your team have a process to go through that? When we're so used to winning, sometimes with teams that I've worked with, when they're very dominant, they're so used to winning. One loss can cause them to second guess what they're doing and start to maybe point fingers, but because they're not used to losing, right? And so I'm curious for you, if you haven't lost a lot, how do you process? What does it look like to move on from a loss? What do you do? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think the word that was coming to mind is rationalize. Like I have to look back and say, okay, why did we lose? What was it? Like we lost a game this year to Tennessee. We lost 1-0, but we outshot them 17-1. So it's like you can't really say, okay, like we got outplayed, we had the wrong tactic, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. Like so that loss to me, like I didn't lose sleep over it. I was like, okay, it's fine. Now the next game we also lost to BYU, but we didn't play well. And what I could see there was a lack of buy-in. And so then I was able to really boil it down. Okay, the reason we lost is because we had half the team trying to do one thing, half the team trying to do another. I'll always go back to myself. Okay, then we didn't quote unquote sell it correctly, right? Like if we didn't get everybody bought in, that's on us. So we have to address that. But what really helps me move through losses is like figuring out kind of what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, and then how do we address that. The tricky part, yeah, about coaching somewhere like this where, yeah, we're used to success is I don't know if it's a real word or not, but we use it like our players tend to catastrophize, right? Like you lose one game and all of a sudden the season's over. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like we're good, guys. We're okay. And so that is something we talk about too, which is like, okay, like, are we being rational or not? Like we're not being rational here. Let's figure this out. So that is something that I've been fortunate to always coach somewhere that's used to a lot of success. And that is a theme that comes up quite a bit. Just like when you're used to perfection, and then when something goes wrong, then it does cause a lot of doubt. And so that was something we battled a little bit after our little two game our losing streak, if you will.
I think a lot of it comes back. I've heard this from Nick Saban, and for those that aren't college football fans, one of the best, if not the best, college coach of all time. And at Alabama, one of the things that he talked about, coach, was after a win, he'd be very critical. After a loss, he'd be more pick you up, kind of a best friend, because chances are these kids they already know by the outcome on how they played and how they got there. So the way to neutralize them was to kind of play the opposite. So when they were high, he was actually kind of bringing them down to a little bit here. When they were really low, then he was the one bringing them up. Do you relate to that? Is that something that you've experimented with? What are your thoughts on that tactic?
I do relate because I think as a staff, our job is to stay steady. Like that, like we need to be the level that everyone's coming back to, kind of like the barometer, right? Like we need to be the ones that's setting the tone. And so yeah, after a great win, like you're not going to see me going too crazy. I'm usually all right. Yeah, we were solid, but this is what we need to work on. And after a loss, I feel like yeah, my job is to bring everybody like to help them see the cause and effect of what we did or didn't do and then empower them to change it. And yeah, one of the things we do have a hard time with is like soccer, kind of like a basketball or something, maybe like we rely really heavily on confidence and creativity, right? Like it's especially the way that we play. So it's not going to serve me often to get the players in a headspace where they are second guessing because that like goes completely against what we want. And so, yeah, like, are we ever overly critical? I don't think so. We're kind of always giving solutions. I guess that's how I would coin it better. Like, we're always giving them solutions, um, and then empowering them to like make decisions and play with flair and play with personality. Because for us, like, if we go down a path where everyone's afraid to play, then we will not be one of the best teams in the country. That is for sure.
I like that word empower. That's powerful. So at this point, coach, we've got some games into the season. We're working our way through, and at this point, I can imagine a lot of playing time and roles. They're solidifying themselves, and there's some writing on the wall for some student athletes, like, hey, I'm not playing as much. What I'd love to hear, because I think it's very applicable for where you're at right now, and I know it's a little bit about expectations and some things we talked about, but what does the conversation look like? How do you help the players who aren't getting as much playing time than they thought they were? How do you keep them engaged? Because we both know that your number can be called at any time. We both know that we need you in practice, that you're a very valuable part of this team. However, if they're not playing, they might think that they're losing value, especially as the season goes on. So, from a coaching perspective, how do you keep the players who thought they were going to be playing more, aren't playing as much? How do you keep them engaged and a part of the crew?
A lot of different ways. One, setting expectations, right? Like I think that is huge. I really do think disappointment and frustration comes when expectations are not being set. Like they don't come from the circumstance itself all the time, right? It's like a misalignment of what you wanted compared to what you're getting. And so we try to be super honest about that. We even ask our players, okay, where do you think you stand? And then we meet with them individually and we kind of correct either you're on track or no, this is really kind of where you are and what the rest of the season could look like. We also, though, really pride ourselves on being fair. And I think that's really key. It's like those players have to stay motivated when they know that one, you've been honest with them, but then two, that if they're doing certain things, if they're behaving a certain way, approaching training the right way, all these things, they need to know that I'm going to actively look for minutes to give them. And so we have to kind of stay true to that. And sometimes that's hard because maybe it's a tight game. But if we feel someone has earned the right to play, then we're going to find a way for them to get those minutes. Um, but also being really honest about their behaviors, whether they're okay or not. So, like, we'll say, like, I don't ever need you to be happy you're not playing, but you don't get to sulk on the sideline. Like, we'll kind of joke with them and say, you can save that for your dorm room, but like, you don't do it on the sideline, right? Or we say, okay, if you want to talk about that, then I can talk to you about it. But like, you don't have to show me you're disappointed, right? Like, I know already. You don't have to do that. The other way, like in training, I think probably less than a lot of teams around the country do we split the group into like starters and non-starters. We're pretty generous, I think, with how we give reps in training. And part of that too is because we have a lot of depth. So yeah, on any given day, most of our players could step in and do a pretty good job. But we're conscious of that. And what's funny is my inclination would be to separate more, but it's always, honestly, it's the players that, it's kind of the starting group that has always been an advocate of that in this program, where we've had, like very solidified starters say, hey, maybe we don't need to split up as much, right? Like let's keep it more even and make feeling more fair, that everybody has an opportunity. So there's those types of things. But then it also comes down to like setting the expectation again. Like it will always come back to that. I'm like, you don't come to UCLA because you got guaranteed minutes all 4 years of your career. Like you don't, that's not what this is. Like it is based on your performance. It is based on the game plan. Like it's all those things. Um, we have a ton of players here that could have chosen to go elsewhere and been a 4 year starter. But obviously they didn't. They came here for other reasons. We also set the tone with the team of, I'm like, okay, so say you're here for a whole year, and then during season you play 150 minutes, which is very little. I'm like, can you so just diminish everything you got from being a UCLA student athlete for the whole year into just the minutes? I'm like, that doesn't seem fair. I'm like, you got a chance to go to the number one public institution in the country. You got the chance to train with and against some of the best players in the country every single day. You got to develop. You got to learn this. You grew off the field. And you're going to be upset because you didn't play enough minutes? I'm like, that doesn't seem like the best perspective. So a lot of it is just like the willingness to have these kind of conversations. And then again, they can choose. Um, but it is something that like programs all across the country will always face. Because sometimes I'm like, wow, the only way I could have everybody happy is if we only had 11 players on the team.
And
Like, then
won
everybody's
every game.
playing. Like, there you go. Yeah. And win every game. And now, like, we've solved the hardest problem of coaching. But obviously, that's not it. And so we just like, we try really hard to be fair. We try really hard to be honest. We try to give them perspective. And we do set the boundaries of like, okay, there are places where it's okay to kind of be upset and this or that. And there's places where it's not. And
From
yeah,
yeah,
so we'll see.
from getting to know you in this conversation, listening to a lot of your podcasts, it seems like there are two kind of core values that you rest upon when you're coaching. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear a lot of in your language is truth and transparency. If you would agree with that, tell me kind of why you rely on those two, and what does that really look like? Because I think some coaches might have a different definition or different look, and that's okay. But what does that really mean to be a truthful and transparent coach?
Yeah, so truth, obviously they need to know that what I'm saying is honest, right? Like I'm not playing mind games. I think that's what it is like we're not a staff that's trying to play mind games. Like I'm not going to tell you something just to see you how you react to this. Like no. I'm like I'm just going to tell you what I really think, my honest assessment of what's happening, my honest assessment of your performance or your behavior, and there you go. The transparency piece is I really believe like if I know something that's either going to affect a player's performance or well-being, I feel it's my responsibility to tell them. Right? Like we don't really believe in withholding information unnecessarily. So I think that really helps just build trust within the program. I think where it came from is yeah, like I imagine myself as a player. I was a player that would get so wrapped up into everything because I cared so much and I was so dedicated to being a player. And I think when you are like that, you are susceptible to kind of those mind games, right? Like you're going to think, oh, well, my coach said this to me. What does that really mean? Or this happened and I don't know. Like, and then I was on the blue team yesterday. Like you can get just like so lost in it that I try to not do that. Like, because that was me. Like I would read into everything. And so we try not to do that. Like we try to make it really clear. I always tell the players, like, if something's keeping you up at night, you can even just text me at night and say, hey, Mark, can we talk about this tomorrow? And then you can go to sleep. Like, there's just not a ton of things in this game that you need to lose sleep over.
Yeah, Doc Rivers says this quote that average players want to be left alone, good players want to be coached, great players want to be told the truth. And I think so often as coaches, either we're trying to protect the athlete by not giving the hard truth, perhaps, or we're just not equipped with the way to go about it, or maybe we don't know the truth either. That could be a part of it too. And I'm sure there's right ways and wrong ways to go about this. And I'm sure as you know, in your 10 years of coaching here, you've learned some right ways and wrong ways of delivering truth and having some hard conversations. What have you learned about having difficult conversations, being a truthful and transparent coach? What are some lessons that you've learned from resting on those laurels?
Yeah, I've learned that it is hard. Um, And I've grown a lot in this, and I'm still growing in this because, yeah, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Like, I care about our players so much, and I see their little lip quiver, like, as we're telling them the hard truth, and it makes me want to cry. But I'm learning that, like, they often are more resilient, maybe, than you think, and they will always appreciate being told the truth. Like, I've never had someone get mad at me for being honest. It will always be the opposite. And so that I think kind of rings true to me, where I'm like, okay, I know it's kind of hard words to say, but this is what it is. I think the delivery is super important. We often tell our players, like, the truth does not have to be harsh. Like, the way you say it does not have to be harsh. We say, okay, this is where you stand. This is what it is. When I'm considering playing time, this is my concern, right? Like, this is the reason you did not go in the last game. And just keeping it very, like, honest, very I almost said dry, but not dry, but like kind of unemotional of like just this is
Direct.
when it really came down to it, this is
Mhm.
what it was. That's why we made the decision. But then I also think there's a huge value in being vulnerable myself in the sense of like, hey, I understand why you're upset about playing time. And even looking back at the game, like I don't know if I did make the complete right decision. Like I felt that was the right decision in the moment. But I see now that you know what, yeah, like you were doing a good job. You did connect your passes, like, and just kind of acknowledging that side of things. Um, I hope our players know, like, I'm under no impression that I'm right all the time. Like, I'm like, it's just impossible. I'm like, I'm kind of doing the best I can. I think they know that. And because we're open about that, I think they're pretty understanding. Like often, I think players just want to be heard. They want me to know that they want to play. They want me to know that they're willing to do anything. And so if I can acknowledge that piece, then usually those conversations go pretty well. The other piece to that is like I've tried to limit or change my language about those types of conversations because I would always say, "Oh yeah, it's a hard conversation." I've been trying to tell myself it's not. Like it's a necessary conversation that's going to trick me into thinking it's easier maybe than it is.
Hey, it works. Language
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. And so when we talk to our players about it, like we used to say, oh, you have a responsibility to have the hard conversation. And we've started to leave that part out where we say, you have a responsibility to have the conversation. Doesn't have to be hard. Like it just needs to happen. So you're going to do it. And I try to remind myself that too.
Very cool. So with this Coaching Beyond the Scoreboard series, one of my goals is to just talk about things that are away from the X's and O's and things that don't get talked about enough. I became a dad a year and a half ago. I know you're in a similar stage of life. One
Oh
of the things
yeah.
that doesn't get talked about enough, Coach, is balancing family, children, and coaching. Now, you've been in this new life stage for a little while, and there are so many moms and dads out there who are trying to juggle it all. I would just love you to speak to those folks who are trying to be this elite coach, trying to have a transformational impact, also trying to be a great parent. What have you learned from this experience, and what kind of advice would you shed upon those specific coaches out there?
Yeah. One, like I sit in a seat of privilege because I'm the head coach and I get to set the tone for everybody. And I like that's not lost on me. So like because of how I in some way have chosen to integrate my daughter into our program, like everybody has been very graciously just getting on board. But I also understand the plight of somebody that's not in the seat that I sit in, where that balance will be much harder. So I've been able to set the tone of kind of this blended work-life balance, if you will, where my daughter's here on campus with me 3, 4 times a week. My associate head coach, he has a 4-month-old who's also here 2, 3 times a week. My One of our other coaches, she's expecting a baby in February who will also be here 3, 4 times a week. Like we've just made this part of who we are. And in that light too, like I couldn't do what I'm doing unless the people around me were so accommodating and so open. And like it means so much to me that my daughter is now growing up in a place, whether it's my staff, whether it's our department, whether it's our team, where like nobody sees her as a burden, nobody sees her as a distraction. She's just part of the program, and everybody's willing to help. now that I've done it, and I've been so lucky to benefit from that mindset that my staff has in my department. Like now, as my staff is going through something similar, like I feel so inclined and responsible to do the same. So now it's just kind of who we are. But I will say it can be really difficult, right? Like I do a lot of film at 10 o'clock at night. It's just what it is, right? Like my ability to stop something mid-task and continue it 5 hours later I've really honed in on that ability because that happens all the time. Um, but just as much as, there's a little more strain or stress or whatever it is with my daughter around or just having kids in general and feeling like your mind is two places at once constantly, like there is incredible benefit to having her here. And just to watch her grow up in it, to watch our players just kind of rally around her all the time and to see how they've grown in comfort around little kids, like just as she has grown up, has been awesome. Um, when she doesn't come on the road, our whole team is like, we miss her so much. Like, it's not as fun when she's not here because she's on the bus and she's at meals and she's laughing and she's, doing her thing. So she provides just a lot of life in the group. And so it has been amazing, but it is really hard. And I'm just very thankful that I have amazing people around me that have been so supportive.
It's fun to see. If you're listening on audio, you won't be able to see, but just to see your face light up. I mean, you smile so big when you talk about her and being a part of the crew. So I can tell that's very important for you. So very, very cool and very inspirational. Coach, as we close down, the question that I've asked all the coaches in this series is simple yet a deep one. So take your time on this. But the question is, what's the greatest piece of advice that a coach has given to you? Greatest piece of advice that a coach has given to you, and then perhaps how are you living that out?
Yeah. So whenever I think of like a mentor or someone who has coached me through, in this case, all stages of life, I think of Albertine Montoya. He was my club coach for 10 years as when I was a youth player, and then he was my boss when I was a club coach for another 10 years. And he's just someone that means so much to me. And he's really given me two pieces of advice that stick with me. The first one, and I've said this on multiple podcasts, but I really do try to live it, is like in our circumstance, like he told me that like you can have one of the best teams in the country and you can have an absolute blast doing it. Like those two things are not mutually exclusive. So like being elite and having fun and enjoyment, like you don't have to trade one for the other. And that to me was so powerful because like I coach youth sports. Yes, they're college, but they're mostly youth. Like, and I feel a great responsibility to our players to give them like a good time where they're going to love the sport and they're going to grow the sport and they're going to like soccer has played such a huge part of my life. And I want to give it the opportunity to do the same thing in their life. So like that is huge to me. And I try to live that every single day. And then more recently, um, he gave me the advice of like, through thick and thin and kind of when, coaching has so many ups and downs that can be really hard. He's like, at the end of the day, like trust your instinct and stay true to who you are. Because like if you stay true to who you are, regardless of advice you're getting or this or that, or so many cooks in the kitchen, whatever, like stay true to who you are. He's like, and then that's going to be the way that you extend your career as long as possible. Because like that's when things go wrong. It's like you'd make a decision that's not true to who you are and then whether it goes right or wrong, right? Like that takes from you. That just I think that's exhausting. So that kind of as I age in my career is becoming really sage advice. It's just like stay true to who you are, trust your gut, like don't try to accommodate as many people as possible in this or that because you're going to lose yourself. And I think as coaches or as leaders, like one of the hardest things to swallow is if you kind of lose yourself along the process.
If I could just ask a quick follow-up, because I could not agree more. When you feel yourself getting away from yourself, like getting off the tracks, what do you do to get yourself back on the tracks and to get yourself back into who you are?
I talk to a lot of people. I talk to my husband, I talk to my mom, my sister, like people that are around me that kind of know the story. I have one or two friends that are also in the coaching world. They coach at other programs that like when things get really tough, I talk it out with them. Um, I just I find myself reflecting quite a bit. Like I want to be somebody that can just kind of put it aside and go recenter by doing something other than soccer, but I've learned that's not really me. Like I kind of have to talk it through. I have to wrap my mind around it. I have to rationalize here or there, and then I have to figure out, okay, now that that has happened, like how do I recorrect? How do I get back on track? What can I do to address that so that I'm feeling more at peace with it, or the other person is feeling more at peace with it? So that's what I've been kind of working on. It's obviously a work in progress, but um, that I'm sure that's exactly where this piece of advice came from, actually, is I was struggling with something and I called Albertine to help me talk through it, and this is the advice he gave.
It's a full circle moment here.
Yeah, yeah, for sure,
Oh,
for
that's
sure.
fantastic. Well, Coach, thank you for your time. I know you're very busy right now in the middle of your season here. How can my listeners best support you and your program?
Yeah, just I mean, this is for women's soccer in general. We're kind of like on the precipice of really being a global sport. So whatever support we can give, watch soccer, support the young soccer players around you. Obviously our team, we can use all the support we can nationwide. If anyone's around and, can come to games, that's huge. Um, and then also just supporting our players individually because we're also at a place in women's sports, especially in women's soccer, where like now you can see the power in being a women's soccer player. And so that only comes with a supportive fan base. So whatever you can do to just show that to both our program and our players.
Awesome. And the last question is, what does coaching beyond the scoreboard mean to you?
Oh, it's just about people and relationships. And I will always say, like, as a coach, I've been fortunate to have a great record, but I couldn't tell you how many wins or losses I have, and I'm sure no one else could either. Um, but for me, the thing that matters most is how we've impacted our players' lives and um, how they view their relationship, not just with us as a staff, but with the game of soccer itself.
Man, the sport is lucky to have you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.